just a little bit of Talmud study before we move into our final session for today, which is the introduction to Jewish spirituality and meditation through prayer. Yesterday we spoke about funerals, and we're moving into the Talmud right now. And Yaakov, if you have the book, I'm on page 80. Have the book, then please join along with me and just listen along. So we learned yesterday about funerals, something fascinating about an insight into what actually happens at funerals and why you should listen to the eulogy and how it can change your life forever. Beyond doing kindness with the deceased, you're actually doing tremendous kindness for yourself. It's like an estate sale where all the good qualities of the deceased are up for grabs, and during that eulogy you can actually draw them and adopt them upon yourself because they're available. And that's what we learned yesterday. If you missed that class, go to youtube.com/Jewish Gardens, click on the playlist, and you can find all of the Talmud classes, all of the trust classes, Gates of Trust. You'll find the radio shows. You'll find the prayer classes, Introduction to Jewish Spirituality and Meditation through Prayer. You'll find all the classes listed over there in a very beautiful way, very organized nicely, so you can follow back to any classes that you missed or that you want to rerun. For example, if you want to rerun in this conversation or rerun on Friday's conversation or on last week's Farbrengen, where we spoke about God and the Holocaust and coronavirus or no evil descending from above, it's all there in the archive of youtube.com/Jewish Gardens. Let's do some Talmud. The Gemara returns to the subject of the synagogue and prayers. Rav Huna said, whoever prays behind a synagogue is called wicked. As it says, the wicked walk on all sides, Psalms 12. He is called wicked because it looks as if he's denying the one to whom the congregation is praying. Now, this is fascinating. What does it mean, whoever prays behind the synagogue? Like, what does that mean? I think it would mean somebody who turns his back to the ark. That's what I think it means. Everybody's praying towards the ark. And if you're praying with your back to the ark, you're showing like you disdain, you're disrespecting God. Let's take a look in the notes. As the Gemara will explain next, this refers to where the person is behind the synagogue, with his back to it facing the other way. That's what I thought. It looks as if he is denying God to whom the congregation is praying for several reasons. First, everyone is praying inside the and he's praying outside. Second, everyone is praying facing the front of the synagogue to the east, whereas he's praying facing the opposite direction to the west. And third, he is praying with his back to the synagogue in which everyone else is praying. So if you pray with your back to the ark, then you really are insulting God. And that's why the Talmud says he is called wicked if you pray with your back to the synagogue. Abaye said, we say this only where he does not turn his face to the synagogue. But if he turns his face to the synagogue so that he is facing the synagogue as well as praying towards the same direction as the congregation, we have no concern about it, even though he is outside. So basically, as long as you're facing the ark, you're okay. I guess I was talking about if you're outside the synagogue, not inside the synagogue, it would have been a problem. Abaye is saying it's okay if you're outside as long as you're facing towards the ark. It's not considered disrespectful. I guess the general gist of the law here is that don't stand in a body language manner where you're insulting God. The Gemara cites an incident that shows us how severely this matter is treated. Story of Elijah the prophet. We're going to meet him next week. He's coming to our house next week, Wednesday night. There was a certain man who was praying behind the synagogue and did not turn to face the synagogue. I guess he had his back to the synagogue with his back to the ark as well. Elijah the prophet passed by and saw him appearing to him in the guise of an Arab merchant. Not everybody that you meet is a human being. Angels sometimes come in the form of human beings. Sometimes they look like Gentiles. Elijah the prophet showed up to him in the guise of an angel. In the guise of an Arab merchant. Elijah said to him, is it like before two powers that you stand before your master in prayer? That is, you seem to be praying in a different power. You seem to be praying to a different power than the one the congregation inside the synagogue is praying to. They're praying to God, and you seem to be praying in a whole different direction outside the synagogue. It seems like your body language indicates that you believe in more than one God. Whereupon, viewers' discretion advised, drew a sword and killed him. Elijah disguised himself as an Arab, said the people nearby should realize that even a non-Jew can see how wrong it is to pray behind the synagogue in this way. The reading of a commentary called Rif has it as a certain Arab merchant passed by it, that it wasn't Elijah at all, that it was an Arab merchant that killed him. Maharsha wonders why the man deserved to be killed. I mean, that's pretty intense. for praying with his back to the synagogue. I mean, it wasn't like he was doing something evil. The guy was praying, for heaven's sake. Okay, he had a sense of direction a little off, but killed? I mean, don't you think it's a little intense? Ben Yehoyada says that it is because a person is liable to death for disobeying a directive of the sages. Rabbinical law, my friends, is binding as much as biblical law. And if you violate a rabbinical law, the rabbis have every right, the court has every right to execute, just as it would on violating biblical law. Ber Yosef explained that he was liable to death because he has separated himself from the community. And when a person separates himself from the community, then he is also liable to death. That's pretty intense stuff over here, guys. Let me see the comments on YouTube. What about suicide? I'm not sure. Suicide, Elaine Collins. Oh, you're probably talking about the question of how a person can take his life into his own hands. You cannot terminate your own life if it's not predetermined by God. That's about suicide. There's a person in my father's shul who tried to shoot himself once, and he put a gun to his temple and he shot the gun at point blank range. The guy lost vision in both of his eyes, and he, I believe, is still alive today. He found his faith through that episode. He was obviously at the bottom of his faith, bottom of the rope when that happened, but he survived from point blank range. How you miss, I have no idea, but he survived. He severed both optical nerves, but he survived that. And suicide also is not in the hands of a human being. Rob Burgers, story on TV about U.S. census going on now. Story made reference to the first census ordered by Moses. Now remember, when Jews are counted, Rob, it's never by individual. We are counted by half shekel contribution. Always turn it into a fundraiser. So we never count people. We only count representations of people, like yarmulkes, or not one, not two, not three, how we count the minyan, or we count Torah verses, but we never actually count people. Credit card is a great metaphor. I'm thrilled that you like that. Thank you so much, Rob Briskin. Welcome to the conversation. I'm glad that you like that metaphor, Rob. Thank you for letting me know that. Awesome. Good. So we're going to go a little further in the Talmud here. Are you okay with this explanation of why the guy died? I mean, that's pretty intense stuff over here. Ouch. Now, I'm just glad that Elijah was the one that executed the judgment, because that makes it a little bit easier to bear. I mean, Elijah is, straight sent by God. So it makes it a messenger of God. But the message we learn over here, guys, is that rabbinical law is very, very important. You cannot dismiss something by just saying, oh, it's just a custom. It's just a rabbinical law. It's not biblical law. You can't do that. This lesson of the story of the Talmud teaches us something very fundamental and very important. That God gave full authority to the rabbis to make a law. It's kind of like the Constitution of the United States of America. Let's think of the Constitution like biblical law, right? But then you have modern day courts that have the full authority to interpret the law. So whether they want to interpret the Constitution as a right to bear arms, or that you're allowed to buy guns, or that you're not allowed to buy guns, or if they want to interpret the abortion, the Constitution, that you're allowed to do abortion or that you're not allowed to do abortion, whichever way the law is interpreted by your modern day courts is fully binding and exactly as powerful as the original Constitution. Same thing with biblical and rabbinic law. Even though the Torah is biblical law, when the rabbis interpret that law for modern day times, that has the full authority of God Almighty, who said that the rabbis, you have to listen to the rabbis of your generation. The verse in the Torah says, I'm going to quote the verse right now. And so what does it say? That says in the verse in Deuteronomy that you have to do whatever they tell you, even if they tell you to right or left, which means even if they tell you about something which is obviously left that it's right, or something obviously right that it's left, you are obligated to listen to them, because God gave the full authority to the rabbis to apply the law, as long as it doesn't actually explicitly violate the biblical law. So, for example, the rabbis can't get together and say, we collectively now cancel Shabbos or collectively cancel tefillin. They can't do that. But what's really, really interesting is that today with coronavirus, the rabbis are giving some very interesting rulings. For example, you're supposed to burn your chametz next week on Wednesday morning. You have to normally burn your chametz. However, this year they're telling people in Israel, certainly where they're living in apartment buildings, that you don't have to burn your chametz. You can flush it down the toilet, or you can, that's basically what they're saying. You can flush it down the toilet, because they're hoping that people are not going to leave their homes in order to make public fires or to light bonfires inside of their apartments on the 14th floor of a building, because that's not going to be good for many, many. Helen Alec, it's also important, Warren says, it's also important to follow the Torah with your eyes when it is being carried through the shul during the Torah service. I'm not sure in what reference you're saying this, Warren. Where are you basing this on? You have to follow the Torah with your eyes. I mean, certainly that's respectful. I guess you might say that in the context of the Talmud is saying that you're not supposed to turn your back on the Torah, and it might be disrespectful if you're not looking at the Torah. I can tell you that the Rebbe would often gaze at the Torah as it left the ark and came to the bima. The Rebbe would stare at the Torah. It's a sign of respect and adoration. So maybe you can connect that with this Talmud, which is saying that you're not supposed to turn your back on God in the ark. Okay?